Alrighty, so this is going to be on optimization, scaling, ad strategy. So we're going to talk about optimization and scaling, the differences of that, or actually the difference between initial ads, optimization, and scaling. And then we're going to break down each. I just want to make sure you're in the right place though before we get into this. So a few givens at this point. Unless you're just kind of rolling into this training, you already have a bunch of stuff running and you're pretty advanced. Like at this point, you should know what funnel you're doing, right? I've been through all of those videos about how to do the funnel in the lead generation section of the training, okay? Then you should have really been through all of the videos in this training up into this point. Otherwise, like, this is not gonna make any sense. Like, you definitely have to go through your specific funnel training in the lead gen section, the ad strategy, audience strategy, mindset around validation, the campaign budgeting strategy. I mean, that especially, or you're not gonna understand this. And then also the KPIs and daily workflows. Again, like if you don't know the daily workflow, it's gonna be hard for you to understand how to apply this strategy. So again, I would just go through that real fast before you go through this. Just don't hop around. If you already know ads pretty well, then like you'll kind of pick up what I'm putting down here. So again, in summary, know your funnel, your KPIs, the overarching strategy I recommend to test, and your workflow. Those are the big prereqs for this training. Now, what's the difference between initial ads optimization and scaling, okay? Initial ads is just like when you launch the new tests, and initial ads refers to what we covered before about how to evaluate those in the first 4 to 14 days, okay? That's kind of its own way of thinking. Then you have optimization. All optimization is, hey, you're keeping the budget consistent over time. Like over the next month or 2 months, you just want to spend a consistent $1,000 a day or whatever it is. Optimization is just pruning stuff that eventually falls way out of KPI and launching new stuff, right? So it's just really keeping the budget consistent, but just kind of optimizing the bottom 20% because most of it's in KPI. Then scaling is when, okay, you had a budget that was consistent. Now you're projecting a bigger budget and you need some way, a strategy essentially, to fill that budget while remaining as in KPI as much as you can, right? That's scaling. So these are 3 different things and 3 different strategies. So initial ads, we already covered in a different section, and it really depends on your funnel, right? So again, initial ad strategy, intro, DM ads, Facebook group, and then VSL, you'll find out all that stuff there. And I kind of give the barometers of how I make decisions cutting wise as we get into it. Optimization, okay? So optimization and how this ties into your natural workflow. So again, this would be after you've already gone through the initial ads part, and this is more ongoing, all right? So as you've probably learned in the workflow training, every day you or somebody on your team is going to go in and check out how the campaigns are doing. Now, we want to look at all the campaigns in 4, 7, 14, and 30-day timeframes, okay? How to actually do this should have been in a previous training, in the workflow training, but we want to look at 4, 7, 14, and 30-day timeframes, okay? So here's how to think about doing this, right? If the account, here's how to think about if you cut stuff. If the account as a whole is well within KPI or under KPI or just doing really good, like you're happy with it, don't touch anything unless you have stuff that's like wildly out of KPI. Like if you have if your KPI is $300 per call and you have 4 campaigns running, 3 are getting $150 cost per book calls, so just crushing it. But then you have one doing 500. Yeah, just cut the one doing 500. But like, what I'm saying here is like if your account as a whole is in KPI and you have maybe a straggler or 2 that's a little bit out, but everything as a whole is in KPI, and then the straggler or 2 is just like 20 or 30% over KPI, especially if it has a history, just leave it, okay? Because their ads are very, very weird. There is just something to be said about just not touching it, okay? The less you touch ads, the better, right? We have a saying in our company, no touchy, okay? Most times, most people's issues with ads is because they, especially in this stage, is because they just fix it until it's broke, right? So when you get stuff working, just do not mess with it. Don't touch it at all. Like we don't touch anything. We don't even try to increase the budget. Like I know some people recommend increase it by 20% or 50%, whatever. I don't even do that. I think usually that just doesn't work in my experience. So I don't know how many more times I have to test that, but it just doesn't work. So again, like if everything as a whole is working good, just try. There's value in just not touching it. There's been times I've had everything working good. I tried to cut a campaign that was just like a little bit more expensive than I wanted it to be, threw everything out of KPI. So that wasn't worth just paying a little bit more for that campaign. You see what I mean? Now, if your account as a whole is at KPI, right? So the previous example was like well within, like you're crushing it. If the account as a whole is at KPI or like maybe kind of borderline or like maybe a little bit more expensive. So it's like not bad enough to cut, but you're like, it's like more expensive than I want. What you want to do is you want to go through, scan all the campaigns. Again, you look at stuff through 4, 7, 14, and 30-day time frames. And any campaign that's out of the main KPI, which for a VSL, that's going to be calls. For a DM ads, it's probably going to be DMs because you're probably not going to be able to track calls unless you have a sophisticated system. For group, it's probably going to be leads because, again, you probably can't track group joins or calls unless you have a really sophisticated system. There's ways to do it, but it is complicated. So any of your main KPIs that are more than 10 to 20% out of KPI within the 7-day window, then we want to kind of put those under scrutiny, okay? What does that look like? So let's say my cost per book call is $300, all right, that I want my KPI. And then I have a campaign that's like $400. Okay, the first thing I want to do, and that's in the 7-day window. The first thing I want to do is look in the 4-day window and see where that's at. Usually the 4-day window is going to be worse. That's probably, because usually this campaign's been running, it's been fine. Now recently it's gotten expensive. So usually the 4-day window is worse. But in the rare case where the 4-day window is better, you almost always just leave it because it's trending up, right? And then I'll even look at 1 and 2-day windows actually, because if, for instance, if it like is out of KPI, but like, man, yesterday it just slapped, I'm gonna leave it and see what it does. Okay, so I'll look at 1 to 2 days, 4 days, just kind of get an idea there. Because if there's any good uptrends, I'm probably gonna leave it. Now, what's likely gonna happen is it's out of 7-day a little bit. Again, like you wanna look at stuff that's about more than 20% out of KPI or so. You just don't wanna overcut, especially if things are going pretty well. So like again, 300, I'd be wary of anything that's like 370 plus, right? Maybe, I don't know, probably anything 400 plus, I would start to get wary of, right? So if 300 was my cost per book call. So then again, if I look at it, it's $400 in a 7-day window. Then I look at the 4-day window and it's $500. Okay, now I'm a little bit worried. Now I'm going to look at the 14-day window. Now, again, in the rare case where the 14-day window is out of KPI 2, I'm probably going to cut it. Okay? And then if the 14-day window is in KPI, which most likely usually is going to be in KPI because if this has been a long-standing campaign, you kept it for a reason. So if that's in KPI, we're going to then move and check the 30-day window. So you see, you might have to go through this again, especially as you do this for the first time. Then we check the 30-day window. If the 30-day window is well within KPI and the 14-day window is well within KPI, then leave it for 2 or 3 more days. After that 2 or 3 days, what's going to happen is if the trend continues, 14 days is going to fall out of KPI as well, and then you cut, okay? And then if 30-day window is outside KPI, which would be rare, this would mean that it was bad, then it had a good 7-day stretch in the 14-day, and then the last 7 days has been bad. So that's rare, but in that case you would cut. Now, after going through this, you might have noticed what almost is an easier thing to do and a little bit less granular is just make decisions based on a 14-day window process. You could do that if you wanted to keep it super simple, right? Because you can see kind of at the end of the day, the 14 days sort of made the ultimatum. But I like to do it this way. I like to look at everything every day. I like to look at 4 days, even 1 day, 2 day, 7 day, and also just get a really good feel of the campaigns, get a really good feel of like, how everything's doing, how, if there's stragglers, how bad are the stragglers, and, just know anytime you cut something, make sure that you have a test ready to replace it because you got to replace that budget, right? And so again, like if you don't really have any tests right now, you might let something that's borderline or a little bit more expensive or like more expensive than you want run a little bit longer, right? But then again, if you have something that is, if you have some really good tests on deck that you think are going to slap, then if something's only 20% of a KPI, you might cut that a little bit quicker. Just keep in mind, we don't want to overcut, right? We don't want to mess with things constantly too much. Meta likes it, Facebook, whatever, when we just chill and we just let stuff run. Ideally, that's the name of the game. So again, if your account's borderline or slightly above KPI, just be gentle, okay? We generally never want to cut more than 33% of the total campaigns in the account every 4 to 5 days, okay? Now, if your account is in the gutter, right? If like KPI is $300 and you're booking only $500 a plus per call for every single campaign, then yeah, we can be more aggressive. Like we can cut 50 to 70% of the campaigns out of there to start relaunching stuff. Like you're basically throwing yourself back into initial ads at that point. So some key pointers. You want to look at the metrics that matter. So if cost per lead's high, it doesn't really matter. If cost per book call is good, that's great. Like, cost per lead, especially when you get more long-term, does not matter. Now, like if you're running low budgets, like if you're running campaigns at $100, $200, and your cost per book call KPI is 200 to 400, obviously your lead and lag time to get data on that is going to be longer, right? And so, then you can start look at cost per lead, because if anything happens egregiously bad there, you could be worried. And that is the other thing too. With this formula, just know that if you're spending, like you kind of want to look at always that 3 to 5x KPI as well, right? Because if you're only spending $100 a day, you're gonna have a bad 7 days. So if you're spending $100 a day, you could almost not even look at 7-day windows if you're running a VSL. If you're running DM or group ads, you can. But if you're running $50 a day or $60 a day, again, like now you're kind of back to looking at that 14-day window. Because the lower the budget goes, the longer you have to wait. Whereas the higher your budget goes, the more you can rely on a 7-day window. Does it make sense? So because there's a lead and a lag time and you need to wait for, it's like we're always looking at that rolling 3 to 5x spend. And so again, if you're only running $100 a day and your cost per book call KPI is 300, you're looking at that's a 9 to 15 day window. So you see what I mean? So we have to look at really the last 9 to 15 days to make a decision. Okay? So again, just keep in mind with low budgets, we gotta look longer, right? But in general, this formula will hold in almost every case. So again, we don't really look for cost per lead unless we're dealing with a low budget campaign and we just want to have a good leading indicator. Like for instance, if you do got to wait 2 weeks to optimize your cost per book calls because you're only spending $100 a day, your KPI is 300, and you haven't had a lead in 5 days, right? But the 14-day window on cost per book call is good, but you haven't had a lead in 5 days, I would start to get a little worried. You see what I mean? So there's that. Again, try to give it time, try to touch as few things as possible, and then just really try to rely on our team and stuff as well in the ads calls of like, hey, what should I do? Because when you're new, you kind of freak out, you want to touch stuff, right? I would, when in doubt, don't touch it. It sucks when, especially if like right now finances are tight, but man, if you can, just like err on the side of letting it run 1 or 2 more days longer than you want. Generally, like for a new media buyer, that is kind of the way to go. Now, if a campaign was a long-standing campaign and it fell out of KPI, you can try lowering the budget from anywhere from 20 to 50%. It really depends. Like obviously a higher budget, you're gonna do a lower percentage, and a lower budget, you're gonna do a higher percentage. So like if we have a campaign at $1,000 a day and it was working for a long time and it kind of just fell out of KPI, we may take it down to $500 a day and it'll cut back on. If it's a campaign at $500 a day, we might take it down to 300 or even 250. If it's at 100, if it's at 100, you don't really want to lower it at that point. At 100, anything below 100 is too low. So in most cases, now that I think about it, like if you were running something at $2,500 a day, you might take it down to 2,000, right? So as it gets to bigger budgets, you want to err on a lower percentage, if that makes sense. I already said this, but we almost never increase the budget of an active campaign. A lot of people recommend this. I don't know what it is. I think, I don't know, I'm just telling you, with especially the VSL funnel, I think the DM ads and the group might be a little bit more forgiving for this, but I can tell you for sure, with the VSL funnel and with our direct to sale webinar, it almost always, if we raise the budget, like if we take a $500 campaign, increase it to $750, almost always we'll get the same amount of calls, we just spent more. It's just better to always create new campaigns and create them at higher budgets. Now, I would imagine if you're doing e-commerce and you're doing something low ticket to where there's a lot of pixel fires going on and you're rocking like 5,000 or 7,000 a day, I would imagine that maybe the Facebook takes the budget a little bit better because there's so much optimization, and these are usually really broad offers, especially if you're running that per campaign. But yeah, for stuff that like we do, I just don't recommend it. I just always like scale new stuff. So speaking of scaling, so here's what we do with scaling. So like, let's say we want to scale our budget, right? Number one, we want to identify the budget gap. So let's say we're running $500 a day and we want to double to get to $1,000 a day. Okay, that's a $500 a day budget gap, right? Duh. So then what we want to do in step two is decide how many campaigns you're to split that budget gap across, right? So what you're going to do there is take the initial KPI, which is the event you're optimizing for. It's usually leads in most cases. Sometimes it's calls, but usually it's leads or DMs or whatever. And then you multiply that by 30. That's your ideal weekly budget. And then you're going to divide that by 7 to figure out your actual budget, right? Or your daily budget, sorry. So let's say you're running a VSL, you're optimizing for CPL. Your CPL right now is $50. $50 times 30 leads a week is $1,500 per week. That's $214 a day. So $214 a day is a weird number. So in this case, what we would do, since we have a $500 a day budget gap, is we would take $250 a day, and in campaign 1 have $250, campaign 2 have $250. That should not say 500 on the way it says that. That's weird. So it can't, oh, sorry. No, this is right. So what we want to do is, again, it's $500 a day. $250 gives us a 30 conversion fires per week, right? So we have two choices. We can do one campaign at $500 a day, that's fine. Or we can do two campaigns at $250 a day. Which one you do doesn't really matter. The one at 500 has a higher likely, it's kind of weird because like the one at 500 has a higher likely chance of working, and you're going to know if it's working much quicker because you're spending more and the optimization is going to be better. But like the two campaigns also gives you a better chance that one is going to work, right? So it doesn't matter. It also depends on how many creatives you have to test. So just pick one, but just make sure you consider the 3 to 5 times KPI spend rule, right? Because ideally you want to get the new test at 3 to 5 times KPI within 4 to 6 days or as soon as possible. It's just easier, right? And your optimization is better. So like in a lot of times, like the $500 a day, by day 4, you've spent $2,000, right? And so, you know, in this case, $2,000, you have well enough to make a decision on if you should keep it or not. I mean, you know, and 250 is actually not too far behind either, right? 250 by day 6, I mean, you spent 13, 1400, so you're good there too, right? So that's fine. Now that you know how many campaigns you're going to test, you're going to do 1 at 500 or 2 at 250 in this example, right? You got to decide what are you actually going to test in those campaigns, right? And so what you're going to do, okay, yes. So what you want to do is it's like you're forming new hypotheses, right? So you kind of, what I do is I list out every single thing I could test, and then I look at that list and I pick the one that I think is the highest chance of succeeding. Okay, so I kind of like look at all, let's say I have like 9 tests I lay out, and I'll give you how to come up with ideas for tests. But I have 9 tests I lay out. I'll just look at the 9 and I'll be like, okay, I think this is like these 9 hypotheses. This one's I think the most true, or these 2 I think are the most true, the best 2 tests, the ones that get me the most excited, and then I'll test those. Okay. So here's a list of easy, high hit rate potential tests, okay? So number 1 is you do just literally the easiest thing. You just take the winner that you already have, you dupe it, and you can use the same budget or you can use a different budget. Like, let's say you have a winner at $250 a day. You can just dupe it with the same creative, same settings, same everything, and just run it at $500 a day. Or you could run it at $250, right? That keep it simple, right? Or what you can do is you can take the winner and you can dupe the winning creative to a new audience bucket you haven't tested yet, or a new one that you create, right? That's a really, really good one as well. Then you can also dupe a winning audience to a new creative angle. Because remember, if you have your ads working right now, you not only found winning ads, but you also found winning audiences. So you can take those winning audiences and then test a new creative angle based on your new informed data and your new formed hypothesis from this one. Test a new creative angle to that new audience, or to that proven audience. That's good. And then also what you can do is you can take a winning audience and then you can test a new creative variation to it. So what that means is, again, if you remember the difference between angles and variations, testing a new variation means you took the winner campaign and all we're gonna do is just change the first lines, change some of the headlines, change in the video, right? There's the banner at the top. You just change the banner, maybe you make it a different color, and then you just dupe that, right? So you just basically dupe the winning audience and creative, but add some creative variations to it. That, in general, I like to do stuff like that. Shoot a new video, do it in a new background. Shoot a new video, have a new 5-second hook, right? In the beginning, if you're spending under $1,000, $2,000 a day, a lot of times you can just get away with just duping stuff. A lot of times 1 or 2 creatives just duping it. But usually, maybe when you get past $1,000 or $1,500 a day, you gotta have a lot more creatives out there. If you look at our campaigns, we'll have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 creatives running at one time, and that's not counting variations. That's new concepts. And granted, at certain points we spend $12,000 a day, right? But yeah. So, anyways, then step 4 is once you figured that out, you launch, and then you go back and you follow the initial ads testing framework we already covered. Now, if you want more advanced ad stuff, this is a training here. I gave this also at Boardroom one time, but this is a training here. It's an advanced training of how we run our marketing team. And at the very, very end, they're kind of 3/4 the way through. I'll show you where actually. But yeah, around here you can see, you should really just go through all of this actually, but around here I start to give a lot of different advanced ideas for tests, so something for you to try. All right guys, that's it.